the strongest play several times. And I imagine he jammed a lot of Death Rattle Hunter last night.
Yeah.
And obviously, with the format here, the way it is, the top 16 was one match in one day. It was great for the viewing because we got 8 matches. Great for the players because they only had to play one match, then they could go away and start concentrating on their top 8 match straight away.
Much Hearthstone to get where they are. I think it's a very good amount of friendly competition.
Yeah, there was a play yesterday that wasn't BM. Basically, Sayed had to attack into a spider bomb, and if it hit a 1 in 3, he would lose. And he just said, "Well played" beforehand. Did the attack? They both smiled as the attack went in.
Yeah.
And just to show that they both understood. They both sort of knew that this was how Hearthstone sometimes works.
So we're going to get to see here from Faeli lining up straight away that Taunt Druid. Pretty undeniably his best deck in this particular series. Should have some pretty good matchups across the board. Whereas Tyler on the Death Rattle Hunter, this is probably the matchup that he wanted to line in the most, I think. The Death Rattle Hunter up against Taunt Druid. In the later stages of the game, you are probably looking at being just overrun by the sheer amount of taunts they can throw down, the offensive capabilities that come with branching paths on a big board of taunts. But in the mid to early stages of the game, that's where you really start to see the weakness of Taunt Druid, because unless they hit Wild Growth, and even more importantly, Nourish, I find, they're going to be struggling to deal with this onslaught.
Yeah, and Tyler has the hand he'd be looking for. He's going to be able to generate the 5/5s reasonably quickly, and Faeli has failed to draw any ramp. This is about as good as Tyler could hope for, give or take a Keleseth.
Pretty much. This is a very, very good situation for Tyler. Faeli really needs to, if he doesn't get the ramp in the form of Wild Growth or Nourish, at least needs to find some way to bridge the gap between the 5 and 8 mana cost, because Taunt Druid, it literally runs no 6 or 7 mana cost cards. So he wants to find cards like another Ironwood Golem there isn't terrible, maybe a Branching Paths for armor, just to see him over the finish line through until he can find Sleepy Dragon or Master Okon.
Yeah, and Tyler is going to begin the Egg Crusade now, I would imagine. And even the Houndmaster, be interesting to see when he goes with that. Probably just play it on curve, but it will be handy later on as well.
Yeah, it has a lot of utility in this matchup, because if they go for a big board with maybe a Master Oakheart and you want to break your way through to that Dragon Hatcher just so they don't stop, so they stop spawning dragon after dragon, it's not a bad idea to save Houndmaster Shore for then, especially because a 3-mana 3/3 that summons a 5/5 is the more aggressive line immediately.
Yeah, I think the 5/5 is likely the correct play here, but then turn 5, you've only got a Giggling Inventor. It's not that fantastic. Obviously, Rexar could be handy, but I think Rexar might not be too great later on. Obviously, it's nice, but you start getting overrun anyway, so unless you go Bloatbat-tastic, you're probably in a bit of trouble.
That's the thing. Rexar is good in this matchup, not for value necessarily, because it's very, very difficult to outvalue a Taunt Druid, but more for the fact that it can pull off those crazy tricks. Rexar can win you unwinnable matchups, like you said, through Bloatbat in combination with Poisonous, Cave Hydra in combination with Poisonous, even just a bunch of Scale Hides to get your lifesteal way back up there. You can be in a decent spot in the late game, but it's much more importantly, as we're seeing here from Tyler, on the aggressive front that he's winning this game.
Yep, and still no ramp for Faeli, so he's really going to have to, like you say, bridge the gap. Now you've said it, it's just springing into my mind, and throw things out there, but just looking at this hand, it's just turgid.
Yeah.
It's just going to crawl to this 9 mana at the moment. Even then it's not fantastic.
I wouldn't have called it turgid. I would have added another letter after the TUR, but it would have been the same sentiment.
Thanks, Derek. I tried to bail myself out, and poof.
That's a PG joke. They can't find me for that.
That's good. So, Faeli, as you said, has just got to do whatever he can. Looking at Tyler's hand, he's got quite a lot of interesting decisions, whether, like, Giggling Inventor is just not much pressure. Houndmaster Shore into Flanking Strike on consecutive turns is more pressure than it looks, because then the Flanking Strike minion gets charge as well.
Very true. Well, it gets Rush.
Yes,
big distinction.
It gets Taunts, it's charge. But with the first minion being dealt with, even now, maybe Tyler will just feel obliged to flanking strike immediately.
Yeah, both players have just got all their tertiary utility cards rather than the actual meat of their deck. Because after Tyler, you know, he had a decent start with the Egg into the Terror Scale, but now it's tech cards, Mind Control Tech, Mossy, and Gluttonous Ooze, and these are all not the matchup that you want those cards for.
Yeah, we saw which matchup you wanted them for yesterday when Muzzy played Gluttonous Ooze on 3 against Rogue, and then Ziliax on 5. That's when you want those cards.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah, now he's going to have to make do with an okay hand, but the reason it doesn't feel okay is because you know the clock is ticking. If next turn Faeli were to play Nourish and you've only got this board of an Egg and a 3-3, you're not going to feel very good about your life.
Yeah, so just getting whatever swing he can onto the board. Tyler knows that if he doesn't see a Nourish coming down from Faeli for mana crystals, he's in a good spot. Wild Growth helps a bit. This means he can get up to 9 mana a little bit sooner, which is where Faeli will start to swing this game back in his favor. And it's not at the moment that he might swing it back in his favor if he gets to turn 9. Unless Tyler gets a very, very aggressive hand in the next few turns, it will basically just be irreparably gone, I think.
So the Wild Growth doesn't have to be played this turn because it doesn't do much different next turn. And
yes,
so Faeli is just going to delay it this one turn, where maybe he can Branching Paths and Wild Growth on the same turn, should he not get a Nourish, that sort of thing. And again, just delaying, like you said, all the way to that turn 9. And Tyler has now picked up Rexxar, and he needs to decide exactly what he wants to do with this card, because it takes away his immediate curve, but it does start generating those chances at getting a crazy beast.
Yeah, you need to really think about when Deathstalker Rexxar is good in this matchup, because for the Battle Cry, I mean, it's possible that when they go wide on a big board after their Hadronox has died, the 2 damage could help to make the trades a bit more juicy. But even then, I think it's unlikely to be better later on. But Tyler needs to think, is there something better I can do right now? The answer to which is not obviously. Not on anything you do on this turn, you won't be able to reap the benefits until a turn or 2 from now, because he can't even kill off this Ironwood Golem. And so he's saying, while he wants to keep up the development right now and get the pressure rolling, everything's just really bad.
Yeah, I think that also turn 7 is quite clean with Houndmaster plus Minion. And so you wouldn't play Rexxar on 7. And then 8 is kind of clean as well with Giggling plus the other Minion. Maybe your Houndmaster's still there. And so not only is Rexxar okay on 6, but also if you don't play it on 6, you're never playing it in any time that's going to make any difference. Faeli knows he wants to play Branching Paths, but doesn't know quite what he wants to do with it, which is...
Yeah, he was considering pretty heavily going for the armor there, and if he was playing perhaps a Malagos or a Taunt Druid, you generally see a much more, a higher tendency to go for for armor, because you have so much card draw in the deck. But Faeli, obviously no Ultimate Infestations. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, Na'Vi is playing 1 copy of Ultimate Infestation in his Taunt Druid, but generally, yeah, there's a lot less draw, so you're more willing to go for it off of the Branching Paths, and he already has the ramp up to Lich King quite happily on the following turn.
Job's done.
Tyler now has gone for this curve that we suggested, where he's just going to manage to use Shore quite effectively. And now Faeli is into big stuff territory though, so this is where if Rexxar doesn't do its job, the match turns horribly against Tyler.
It will. He still has some big old swing turns. If he was to get Katharina that comes down next turn, that's when things can start to get a bit messy for Faeli, especially because he can't afford to deviate from the standard mana curve here by playing something like a Naturalize to kill off the Howlmaster Shore. It's just not worth it. He has to get the Lich King down and pray that Tyler's turns continue to be fairly weak.
Yeah, and fairly weak they will continue to be. There is no Katharina, and so Tyler building beasts. These are going to be so important.
King Muckler, very nice. I think it gets the 3-mana 5/5 and mills a card from his opponent. Could potentially be that Hadronox still for Tyler. Or even just Master Oakheart would be a fantastic mill.
Want to take the stealth, but you also probably want to play the minion this turn, so you might have to take something a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, so...
I love it. Yeah, I think this is the way to go. You get stealth, you get the perfect amount of stats as well.
Because he's just going to use the poisonous,
Oh,
yeah. Stealth kind of wasted ability, but...
Ooh. Tyler praying here. And he gets a decent mill. That's not bad.
Like the cock of the head there. It's like, I tried, I had an idea.
Yeah. It was definitely the way to go, because a 3-mana 5/5 when there's little downside,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
There's enough good cards to catch here as well, like an Oak Heart or Hadronox, that it's worth going for a mill. Especially in an unfavoured matchup. It's always worth taking a chance as you get one.
And the real big swing turn there for Tyler, although it may not be so obvious, wasn't even necessarily the mill. It wasn't the fact that he got a big minion. It's the fact that he got a minion with enough attack through the poisonous, I suppose, that he could keep his Houndmaster Shore alive. He didn't have to trade it into the Lich King, which I think he was definitely expecting to do on that turn, which is massive for him.
Talking of massive, that is what he's going. He's just going for these massive minions, the things that are going to have some sort of chance of getting through these boards. Doing a pretty good job of keeping this board and again protecting that shore that you were just talking about. And that's going to lead to a chance for it to generate damage. One thing that Taunt Druid is bad at when it doesn't draw Oak Heart is making those wide boards until it just has to do one thing at a time. And now he's drawn Hadronox. I wonder if he's tempted to go for Army of the Dead.
Oh wow, what, just to get
there aren't that many
minions,
but just to get some down, rather than playing one at a time, which it looks like Tyler should be able to deal with one by one.
Yeah.
Maybe he's probably not far enough behind yet. Maybe the Sleepy Dragon's big enough that he can play it, but he does have to consider trying to get a swing turn, and Army of the Dead can do that for you.
If he just gets one Dragon Hatcher, Sleepy Dragon, Primordial Drake, there's a lot of good outcomes. And even if he gets rid of spells, is that bad?
I mean, I don't think there's that much being wasted. This game's going to end one way or the other, sort of in 4 turns from now as a contest.
Pulling cubes from the deck is pretty bad. I think that's the main thing that could go wrong for Faeli if he goes for that strategy. There's still 2 in the deck. I believe, taking a look at the deck list, he might actually only be running.
I mean, I'm not a mind reader, but Faeli's face looks like a sort of person who's counting through their deck, doing exactly what we're doing. Yeah. He's sort of trying to work out what are the good outcomes. And if you can't work out in time what you think is going to work well, the best thing is always make the sensible play and maybe spend the whole of your opponent's next turn continuing to work it out.
Yeah.
Oh, Spider Bomb.
Oh man, with the rush as well, just could not be more perfect for Tyler here, pushing through all the damage to face. Faeli knows that leaving up that Houndmaster Shore, not naturalizing it, was a very conscious decision, and it may not have been the best one. The punish was very available there, because he's thinking, I have to go Hadronox and self-naturalize. But we can see here, that might not even be enough. There's just so much pressure on the board in the form of this charging Bittertide Hydra and Houndmaster Shore still getting value.
Yeah, worst case, you've still got King Crush in hand. That's just waiting to finish your opponent the second they get through everything at any point. Big Taunt Wall being represented now, but Tyler has Mind Control tech, and he will be able to make whatever minion he steals rush in as well. Lich King just takes care of 2 of these taunts if he gets the Lich King,
right away.
Just so close to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, taking out the weakest minion first to set up for Mind Control tech. Let's see what Tyler can get.
Derek's excited. Tyler's excited.
It's not bad.
Yeah. In a world where Lich King was looking better though, but even so, yeah, you're right, it's 12 health. He hasn't got to plow through anymore.
I don't think he can get lethal on this turn now. I'm trying to figure it out quickly, but I think the numbers just don't quite add up.
Yeah, because the way that... One of the things about Taunt Druid minions, the shapes are awkward. You can exactly finish 1 or 2 minions, especially when Giggling Inventor helps you tune those numbers up with the 1 and 2 attacks.
But while he may not be able to get the job done right now, it's going to be all in on Faeli to deal with this board. Thankfully, off the card of the Lich King, which I didn't even see because I was so focused on Tyler's turn, Doom Pact in combination with that Resurrection from the Witching Hour is a full board of taunts and a complete board clear from Tyler. It will, however, basically put Faeli close to fatigue in this early stage of the game.
Yeah, and Tyler still has that King Crush. Obviously, Faeli can defend himself with 1 minion, but all the time, it's just going to be so close to the end of the game for him.
It's the only play that Faeli has, unless he thinks he can go Wild Growth into finding exactly Cube. It would be his only out.
I mean, how does he win this game, though?
Well, that's a winning state. That's a winning state. Witching Hour into the Doom Pact is pretty much the only way that he could pull this back, and it puts him in a pretty good spot, I think. As long as he doesn't fatigue himself to death in the next couple turns, Tyler doesn't have an answer for this outside of what you were talking about in the blowback. He needs to find something off of the hero power here to fight back. This is insane.
Play dead, I don't think opens up any more options for him.
Well, it means he can get a bloatbat poisonous and just activate it straight away. It doesn't need to have rush.
Sure.
That is not those cards, though.
Yeah, and bloatbat's the first card you get. So
yes. Yeah.
That is not what he needs.
Pretty nothing selection there off of the zombies. Angry chicken for the win.
Tyler looking for all the world like he's going to get it done, but finally getting the Lich King help there. A little bit of a wry smile on Tyler's face. That wasn't one of the matchups that he had to win, but it would have been so nice to start for him if he had taken it down. And finally,
specific deck target, more just being generally decent matchups overall.
Yep.
Getting a win with that Shudderwock Shaman at some point. I guess he's hoping to target Tyler's Even Warlock is his best chance, but Even Lock is a very, very difficult deck to target because it has no miserable matchups. It's just decent against everything.
Yeah,
it's the real power of the deck.
Anyone who plays Mage usually just gets it banned by pretty much everything in all of Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mage just destroys Even Lock, but that's not a thing that you ever have to worry about because those matchups go for the Quest Rogue and you just ban it out because it's good against two of your decks.
Now we are going to get a look at the mirror, which I believe we saw go... well, the Even Warlock at least was doing pretty well for Tyler yesterday up against Jazayan, where he got some pretty good games with the deck. But now we have what looks like a much more even matchup, with both players finding themselves the Mountain Giant, El Gigante, ready to come down on turns 3 and 4 respectively. If Tyler can find himself looking at the deck lists, he doesn't have Doomsayer or the...
Right.
The Gastropod, the stubborn Gastropod in his deck list.
I think Gastropod's pretty much gone, although it has appeared in champs in some of the decks.
I've seen it in a couple of the deck lists. Yeah. It's not completely left the meta, but I agree it's very sparingly seen. If he could find either of those 2-drops, those are the premier anti-Mountain Giant cards to go for on turn 3, to stop your opponent going for it on turn 3 if they're on the coin. It gets a little bit complicated. That would be the way that Tyler best stops his opponent going for that and gets the first Mountain Giant. We can clearly see, though, Faeli is going to have the first Giant on board, which is massive in this matchup.
When it comes to the Hooked Reaver backup plays, Faeli just has the 2 Spellbreakers, no real tech for those Hooked Reavers, whereas Tyler does have the Black Knight, as well as 1 Spellbreaker. So I think Tyler's in a much better position if the Giants do cancel out, which is often the case, although occasionally not. He is a slightly better position to be the one who can just play the Hooked Reaver without panicking, whereas when it gets to Faeli's chance to get there, if either of them ever actually draw those cards, he's going to have to think a lot more carefully about the swing that the Black Knight can cause.
Yeah, I think we've seen pretty clearly how just how good the Black Knight is in this matchup. It's the main reason you're putting it in here. And I suppose if Tyler was anticipating a lot of Taunt Druid, as Faeli has brought, that would also be a nice tech. Obviously, with Faeli already taking the victory with that, it won't come up in this series. But maybe for Tyler, if he can win, it will come up later on in the tournament.
So Giant versus Giant, and the eternal decision, which is always weird, because the question first you have to ask is, do I think he's got another one? And there's no way of telling, usually. And then the second thing is, okay, if he hasn't, can I just put my homunculus down and start hitting face with mine, and will I get there? And no matter how often you try and get there that way, it never seems, something just seems to go wrong. Unless you have a backup plan of another Giant, which he does not.
Yeah, if we were to see Faeli go face here, it would be pretty much exactly perfect health for Tyler to be starting throwing down the Hooked Reavers, against which, as you pointed out, there's little counterplay for Faeli. He has to be very careful about sending all this damage through to face, which is why we can see him going for the value trade here. This is a pretty big dismissal of one of the advantage that going second allows you. I'm not saying that going second is better, but the good part of it is you generally get the first Giant down, which lets you go face first. But here we're going to see Tyler not having absolutely none of that and just taking the value trades, equalizing the board state, and I would imagine putting Tyler in a pretty good spot again, because after this point, when the Giants have gone card for card and equaled out, I think going first is a pretty good spot to be in.
Yep, and that's the case with most of Hearthstone, although Faeli has looked after his coin, so
Yes.
he hasn't lost it yet. And in even decks in particular, the coin is a pretty huge weapon. It does use, obviously it's there so you can equalise for one turn and one turn only, but in even decks you do get that turn where it's significantly different. Turn 7 is a big one, obviously turn 5, which is now, is a pretty big one. And this has allowed him to get this Gen down, which actually...
It's not bad.
We scorn it, but it's a 6-5 in a matchup where they've just had to deal with an 8-8.
Yes. Obviously, in general, Gen is a bad card. Here, it would have been okay if not for the perfect top deck from Tyler of the Spellstone, which he can upgrade, send in, and say to his opponent, you better have another good 6-drop. He probably does because he coined out the Gen. But Tyler's later turns, as long as he doesn't fall too far behind, are looking absolutely premium.
They are looking really good, especially now we start looking at Gul'dan, obviously. But that turn was pretty good for both players. The both players will be comfortable with it. Tyler had an answer, but Faeli basically stopped Tyler developing beyond, a poor little homunculus. So he didn't lose too much out of that, given that he has got follow-up plays. And I wonder if he's tempted to play the Mossy Horror here. It seems awful compared to maybe the Skulking Guys, which is a much beefier minion. But actually, after you trade the Skulking Guys into the homunculus anyway...
Yeah, 4-4 versus 6-2-7. It's close. It's real close. Hoping to maybe catch a couple more things with the Mossy Horror, or just giving up on playing it at all because he'd rather have the beefier stats. And if you're expecting on turn 7 your opponent to go a 4-drop, maybe a Dread Infernal in the best case scenario for them, or again.
Yeah,
it doesn't trade up particularly well.
The equation on this turn either. Tyler has pretty much filled his hand up now. That's 10 cards. That's why he started waving the Defile about for a second there, but he's okay. One problem he has got, it's not a huge problem, but something he'll want to do differently, is there are no demons in hand. So his Gul'dan is just going to be there for the hero power plus a homunculus at the moment, which isn't that exciting. But it's far more exciting than not having a Gul'dan in the first place.
Yeah, I generally find that unless you've been very, very aggressive, and so the Gul'dan hero power can just close out the game, it's actually just more important in this matchup to get the demons.
Yeah, in the mirror, I think you're right. In most matchups, they don't matter. But in the mirror, there is huge because we've seen time and time again this matchup go to nearly fatigue.
Yeah.
Just because the decks draw so many cards because they're hero powers, and therefore they cancel each other out because they've both got such similar cards. Even when they're not the same card, they cancel out so clearly. They've got very similar stats to each other.
And now I was questioning Faeli's keep of this Mossy Horror on the previous turn. It's looking pretty good here in the ability to completely clear off the board and develop a couple of minions in the meanwhile. I still don't think it's necessarily an auto-play because Twilight Drake is a pretty big minion, but it's still looking pretty strong here.
Yeah, and I think that the key to that one is the Twilight Drake functions well next turn.
Good point.
On curve, on the 4-mana curve, the 8 number. So Mossy Horror, if it wasn't played there, it's never going to kill anything. So the decision you were talking about, play it or keep it in your hand for the whole game.
Tyler at the perfect amount of cards as well. He's managed his taps very perfectly here to get himself up to 9 cards on the Lich King turn.
And Frostmourn's a big deal. We talk about how close this mirror is. Well, 3 extra removals is a big deal, and that's only fair. Faeli had a really good one in the last game. So.
And now this is where, if the board states were switched, Tyler would be over the world in being able to go Black Knight on the Lich King. Faeli has no such privilege. He has to consider going for Bone Mare and then trade on the Skulking Guys, but you never want to use Bone Mare as just like 4 damage, basically, to help the trades. You want to use it on a minion that's going to survive, is the vastly more powerful state to use it in.
It is, although, again, because he knows Black Knight's in the opposing deck, maybe he's actually happy to do it as the +4 this time
around. That's fair. Yeah, that's another reason.
It's a kind of weird way to play around it.
But then if your opponent goes for the Black Knight on like a 1 or 2 health minion, that's a lot better than seeing it on a Lich King or a Hooked Reaver.
This is very true. And the Black Knight's out of hand, so you no longer have to worry. It's also a big deal.
I think this is a good read of the situation here from Faeli in the Black Knight is... Bone Mare is your swing turn. That's when you punish your opponent for not removing your board for a turn.
Yeah, also getting a lot of efficiency out of that Mossy Horror. It did a lot of work. It killed off 2 minions and the last 2 damage came for exacties, which is always nice. But this Frostmourne, it's going to do good work. Tyler does have some healing in hand. There's bits and pieces of healing in deck. And of course, Gul'dan is the ultimate healer if he gets his time. Frostmourne might well buy him that time. This is Faeli's already reached a stage of the game we always talk about where your hand just ends up full of junk. Because Giants and Twilight Drakes tend to get played pretty instantaneously. As soon as this Twilight Drake is played, there's not much left.
But this is such a key turn for Faeli of what does he play around. If there was no Black Knight, I think he'd pretty easily be able to go Homunculus, Sun Fury plus the Hooked Reaver to get down the most amount of attack power on board as possible. But because he knows that is a possibility, he wants to get the Drake down because there's so much less punish for this play.
Spellbreaker, there's only one in Tyler's deck. That is the main punish because of Frostmourne. But
and even then, he can protect. Oh no, sorry, yeah, we'll go down to 1. He'd have to attack him with his Frostmourne. You don't want to resummon a 4/1. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it's also taunted up. He could have not done that if he'd wanted to. It's almost baiting the Black Knight a little bit here.
Yeah, he would have to have made it 4/8 anyway and played the Sun Fury first and then positioned them correctly. You're right, he could have stopped. He could have not given it taunt.
So I think he's almost going for the bait. Not only do you get the +1 if it's not in hand, but you've got the backup of dropping the Reaver.
It's not a good bait.
No, it's not. I mean, Tyler's going to instantly know what's going on.
Yeah. And not even, I wasn't even trying to say that Tyler would not fall for the bait. I'm saying Faeli still loses a 4/9 with taunt if the Black Knight were to come down. That's not a good spot to be in. You've lost a big minion on the board there. But I agree, if he can get down the Hooked Reaver without having that be Black Knighted, that's when Faeli starts to swing this game back in his favor and push for an aggressive lethal.
He has got this massive problem of this Frostmourne, though. It's just mini Gul'dan. Gul'dan is also going to get the job done. Oh, it's resummoning stuff. Yeah, 3 minions. Gul'dan doesn't do much more than that himself these days.
That was probably, as a non-WoW player, I'm just going to go ahead and say that was the worst WoW lore I've ever heard in Frostmourne is mini Gul'dan.
Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's perhaps the soul of a... I don't know.
I have no evidence on which to base it. It
and
could
Raven's
be correct.
not here to ruin it all. We can just make up whatever lore we like. I won't check on this later. It's probably just ruined my day.
As Tyler gets himself 2/1 damage off lethal here, a very, very aggressive line, which almost closes things out, but he takes a nice deviation from just going for surprise 1 off lethal there, because he realizes the backswing could just close things out for him. So I love this play of setting up for very strong lethal on this turn, forces Faeli to make defensive plays that he doesn't want to do, and then even if the board clear is here, a complete board clear and a heal, just Gul'dan, Mountain Giant, whatever you want next turn to reapply that pressure is looking lovely for Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking very hard for Faeli to survive. I mean, survive and have any way of getting through.
Yes.
Obviously, he can heal up a little bit. But he is sweating because he knows this is Ornbook gone.
Volga Homunculus, Spellstone Shroom, that will take you down to 5, up to 12, up to 16. You're very much alive on this turn.
Yeah, and I guess if Tyler's hand looks a bit like yours, you're not in too terrible a spot. But unfortunately for Faeli, Tyler's hand doesn't look anything like his. It's full of actual, really useful immediate cards.
Actual good cards, yeah, imagine that.
Tyler going with the Gul'dan. Not just to secure minion-wise, but that health total was just a little tiny bit precarious.
The fact that you get 2 Dread Infernals here, I've forgotten with the Frostmourne working in combination with it, it works out beautifully. If it was just the 1 Homunculus and the 1 Dread Infernal, I think Bone Man might have just edged it out. But this is such a devastatingly powerful board. Faeli basically has nothing, just has to rely on the Lich King. It worked miracles for him last game. Maybe it can do the same here to edge out a victory versus Tyler.
There is actual lethal in the hand though, the Dread Infernal's
maybe
damage. He's doing it a different way. I'll go for Dread Infernal pings, but this one will work as well. It goes to 1 game apiece in this first quarter-final here in Singapore.
And this match for Tyler was just massive. So important to take this victory in a mirror, because losing to the Taunt Druid, okay, you're expecting that. That is going to get a win. But losing another game in the mirror, you have the Mountain Giant, and we are going to get to see this matchup right now. Mali Druid for Tyler with the Naturalize in hand. And this is not like on ladder, when you go up against a Warlock and you're like, okay, if it's Zoo, I keep Spellstone and I win. If it's even Warlock, I keep Naturalize and I win. And every single time you get it wrong. Somehow you curse yourself into thinking it's Zoo or even Warlock, and it's always the other one.
And there's that what you love bias coming out again. Because the first thing when you said it's not like ladder is I was going to say, well, you know what Druid you're up against here.
Oh, right.
So, because that can also be an absolute disaster
Very
on ladder
true.
when you suddenly get a token Druid in your face, you mulligan away your Defiles.
Yeah.
Not token Druid at all in this tournament, by the way.
Very little, yeah, at least in
Real
the top
surprise.
8, top 16. Mali Druid and to a somewhat lesser extent Taunt Druid coming out on top.
And yet we saw a lot of a reasonable amount of token Druid in Norway literally
Big
just
time.
7 days ago. 6 days ago, in fact. So, how things change in Hearthstone in a week in terms of the tournament meta, at least.
It's still close. I think it very well could switch back again. I think Casey was just telling me he just doesn't like Token Druid. He just doesn't think it's that good. Whereas some players, like we've seen, Meaty on Twitter talking about how he just got like an 80% win rate to Legend with a new Token Druid list. Either way, though, no matter what kind of Druid you're playing,
You win this round, Darren.
when you get this hand of 5 perfect cards in this matchup, you're probably in a good spot as Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler sort of looking at his feet and whistling innocently. Nothing to see here. It wasn't me.
What card do I play here on turn 2, thinking?
He's got a terrible turn 4, though. He needs his opponent to have a giant to make it work.
Well, no, he's not, because it's his turn 3. The wild growth has ruined this game for Tyler. It's Kappa.
So, but yeah, obviously Tyler is going to have not much to do next turn, and I don't think he'll mind. He wouldn't swap this hand for anything now.
Yeah, really just a twig that can make this any better for Tyler. Like, we're talking about this being the perfect hand. That's not quite true, because I think if you could choose exactly what your cards are in this matchup, just talking about what you're moving towards here, rather than going for Ultimate Infestation as quickly as possible, I think you want to go for an early Malagos as quickly as possible, I find, because there's actually very little counterplay available to Faeli against that. He can silence it, at which point you have a 4-12 on like turn 6, which is amazing. And even if they don't, if you can get a Dream Petal Florist to reduce the cost of your Malagos, then go with the swipe, that is, I think, the absolute dream scenario. Tyler's hand is no slouch
to
here.
talk about while we wait for these first 4 turns. So yeah, let's see what the perfect hand is.
Just ironing out what your game plan is in this matchup, which is to try and dominate the board, use your Malagos for board control. That was the big switch for me in this matchup, is when I realized you don't have to go for the OTK combo. You want to use your Malagos to lock down the board, because the response from even Warlock to big boards, big minions, is somewhat limited. They have to rely on being ahead on board through their Mounted Giants and Twilight Drakes early on.
Yeah, Foley's got a look of a man who's like, oh, my opponent did nothing on turn 4's Druid. Oh. There's things that, because they don't do much anyway, but there's things in his hand.
There's things that do things.
And even if it's not a Nourish in hand, he knows that Tyler's got Malfurion or even worse cases.
Yeah.
What he's not happy about here himself is obviously coining out this Drake, leaves him a really bad turn 4 follow-up, and he doesn't really have much option, I don't think. But
it's worse than that, though, because it's not just the fact that you don't want to coin out the Twilight Drake, it's the fact that he also wants to get out that Skulking Geist as quick as he can. Tyler kept a card which was clearly not Wild Growth, because he played another Wild Growth from the hand that wasn't the one he kept, and he didn't play another one on turn 4, sorry. It could be a Nourish, but Tyler just played another card that wasn't Nourish. Faeli expects this to be naturalized, basically, is the point I'm getting at. So he wants to play the Skulking Geist before he gets down his big threats on board.
Of which he has one.
But that makes you even want to be more preservative of that minion. You want to treat that like gold dust. But it's starting to look like any other play that isn't Twilight Drake now, and then you go coin Skulking Geist is pretty miserable, I think.
I'd be interested to see if he can do it. You just can't. We can see their hands, but at some point you just got to say, okay, it's going to happen.
It's sad for Faeli, but it's reasonable. This is a good enough spot for him to save back the Twilight Drake, and Tyler realizing, well, this is not the premium target for my Naturalize, I want to hit Giants and Hook Reavers. I'm afraid of the Skulking Geist, so I think this is a great time to throw it down.
Yeah, and I mean, he also probably knows from the discussion you just gave that the Geist has got a good chance of being there, because why didn't Faeli coin out? Yeah, he's just going to go in with his Spellstone as well. He's worked out why Faeli didn't coin out the Twilight Drake last turn, and it's like, okay, got to use it.
Lovely
Not
read
even
from
taking a
Tyler.
value trade.
I even like going all face here. I think from some players, and myself especially, I've fallen prey to this, is not going face enough in this matchup. You leave yourself too afraid of hooked Reavers. When you realize when you've gained this much mana, you're in this dominant of a position, a 4-mana 7/7 kind of becomes a little bit of a joke.
Yep.
Imagine that, a 4-mana 7/7
That would
being
be a joke. Yeah. No one would ever play that card. We'll talk about it. Yeah, and also you just set yourself up so you can get cheeky Malygos wins, like Malygos double Moonfire on its own without any actual messing around. Just kill them.
Because while you are afraid of 4-mana 7/7s, if you go face for 5 with Ultimate Infestation going into their turn 6 or 7, they have to play Spellstone or Shroom Brewer. They have to play defensively or you just kill them, which means they maybe can't even go for the hooked Reavers.
And now, Faeli realising that Tyler has onto him, he saw the 2 1-drops go.
Yes.
Change of plan, a good change of plan,
Very
not the
good
whole
change of
bailing
plan.
on your change of plan situation. So reacting to what he is seeing.
Tyler he was looking like, it doesn't actually have anything to do on this turn. Maybe it would have been a bit of an awkward turn. After you're in the Pestilent, it looks like a pretty good way to fill out the mana curve.
Finds out really nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The circle of life is over.
Whilst we talk about the aggro plan, obviously there's no reason to be completely crazy about it. Just tidy up the board.
Yeah.
You got UI next turn anyway. You stop your opponent playing anything but Hellfire this turn.
Yeah, well, if you were to have gone all face there as Tyler, the main reason you wouldn't do that is because you leave yourself very vulnerable to Hellfire. I think is the obvious reason. But if your opponent plays Hellfire there and you get to go Ultimate Infestation to face, their turn afterwards is going to be pretty weak. I think it was closer than it looks. Tyler here, however, wants to play around for the moment against the hooked Reavers. And I'm not actually 100% certain that I agree with this from Tyler.
Okay.
He doesn't have Malygos in hand, which leads him away from going with the more aggressive routes. But I think it would have been not out of the question to start pushing damage to face. Then he starts to give up board control and it goes away. It's close. It's real close.
I think in his mind he's got 1 or 2 turns of spending a lot of mana doing nothing.
Yeah.
So your Ultimate Infestation turn, whilst it's one of the best turns in the game, it is a turn where if your opponent's already got a little bit of board, they get another free 10 mana or 8 mana or 7 mana, wherever he's at. Yeah, 7. Because he's not a druid, to make some sort of reload.
Yeah.
But I do understand what you're saying. If he just gets that into the face as well,
that's your win
dead
condition in this
reload
matchup.
things.
Yeah, you just get little bits of chip damage. You just go swipe Hero Power, Moonfire face without even bothering the Malygos.
But now he's got this far into his deck and he's picked up the Twig. He can go for whichever way he wants. He can attack with the old-fashioned kill you till you die from it. But he can keep chipping away with the Twig and set up. Maybe go for actual Malygos, more traditional victories as well.
And what we saw, we saw Faeli take the turn away from Skulkengeist on turn 6 there, but going back with this plan once again, getting through after his opponent drew a bunch of cards. I like going for it after a UI because you have a decent chance of hitting a Spellstone or a Naturalize in hand. As we see Tyler still going with a very aggressive minion trading route.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to talk to him about this after because it's meant that he's ahead on board, undeniably. Hooked Reavers are still not live. And because he hasn't drawn Malygoses or Moonfires, this line has clearly worked out better for him here. I'm just, I think on average it might have been better to go face, but I like his, it's worked out well for him.
I think because Faeli did destroy Giant, Tyler may be taking the view of, okay, I can easily not die anytime soon, and I've got a deck that kills people if it doesn't die.
It's true.
So maybe he just did the switcheroo because he just felt that his hand has worked out nicely in terms of defense.
Good point.
And without the Malygos, if it happened to be card 30 or something,
yeah,
maybe he feels this is better in that situation without giving up too much.
Now, however, I think Tyler will realise I've cleared up the board. I've got a great big minion in play. Let's start closing out this game. He can push a lot of damage through to face. Still demand removed from Faeli, which is by no means actually there in hand. And with Death Coil and Swipe, this is very possibly going to be lethal straight up for Tyler on the following turn.
Yeah, we talk about how the Giants are important in the even lock mirror. Well, Lich King's kind of a Giant. He costs a bit more, but it's a Druid, so he's kind of certainly about 4 mana on average.
This is terrible WoW lore, Neil. The Lich King is not a Giant.
He's big.
He is big.
And he's cool.
Is that if you tick the box big and cool, are you a Giant? Those are the only 2 criteria.
depends if you're talking to a giant or not. You're not going to tell a giant that he's not big and cool.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Got him. But back to the game here, Faeli can obviously survive, but can he survive whilst actually doing things? This is the question we've asked 3 games in a row here. And one was a resounding yes, one was a resounding no.
He can survive from his perspective, and we can see here Moonfire off the top would have closed out the game, or a swipe off the top here is clearly...
Swipes.
Wait.
All right? Because it takes out the minion and does damage to face.
Sorry, I was going to say you could have just gone double swipe and deathcore to face. I thought he might have missed it there, but we can clearly see another way of going about it. Tyler brings out the game 2 games to 1 in this series, and still looking like he could hard target that Shuttlebot. That was his plan going into it, but it doesn't matter. Now, instead, he's just 2-0 against the even Warlock from Faeli. He's just beating every deck here.
Yeah, really, really well.
Yeah.
But at some point around that time, not only did he work super hard, but the amount of Hearthstone he played, something clicked. And he went from guy who has to work super hard to guy who has to work quite hard, but the flair sort of started to appear in his play. And I think the reason Tyler's suddenly started getting much better tournament results at the business end of things is he's sort of making that transition at the moment between super grinder and guy who's actually... He works with Casey, for goodness sake. That's got to rub off on you in the end.
Faeli, if he is going to be taking this matchup, or any wins with this Shuttlewalk, this looks like a pretty good way to get rolling. Obviously, the Keleseth in the starting hand looks pretty juicy, and pretty much any way I think that he can win the board early on is step number 1 in this matchup. Because if you have to deal with all the Death Rattle Hunter's minions through removal, you're not going to get there. You are simply just going to run out of good cards. You only have 2 Hexes, you only have 1 or 2 Earthshocks in the deck.
And Volcano does, against this deck, if you set it up right, it does nothing a lot of the time. Because you have an egg there and a load of health anyway, and then the egg just ends up producing another 5/5 and you lose overload. And
that is exactly right. Your removal just doesn't line up well enough. So getting ahead on board, Keleseth into Chain Gang, into Acolyte of Pain. They're not premium board control minions, but they should be good enough for Faeli against this hand from Tyler.
That being said, like you said, if he is going to do anything in this, this is a pretty decent way to do it. Keep him at the Glacial Shard, valuing the attempt to freeze something later on to protect his board far above just getting it killed by a candle shot.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, that.
Truth is found.
And this is really not a bad hand for Faeli. It's a little bit less proactive than I think he would like. I was talking about the fact that you need to be more, more aggressive in this matchup, lock down the board with the Shuttlewalk Shaman. But obviously with the Keleseth played, any minion he does find from here on in will do a fantastic job of exactly that, dominating the board. And
talking about why Volcano's not that strong in this matchup, he's got Electorate with Volcano. That changes that discussion somewhat. Suddenly he can now clear up through eggs and that sort of thing, because he just cast it twice.
Yeah.
And you can actually do 30 is a lot of health to remove from boards.
Do you think now, looking at this hand from Faeli, that throwing away the Farsight with a Keleseth in hand was the right way to go? Because if you can, obviously you'd rather have Mana Tide Totem on turn 3. No one's disputing that's the better 3-drop to turn.
So I mean, Farsight, you just throw it away and get a new card anyway. So if you were going to draw that Mana Tide, you get a 0-cost Mana Tide anyway, the way that it would work.
Yes, and you draw yourself a buffed card, which is a pretty big deal. Drawing cards after Keleseth has been played is really good.
Yeah, it feels like that would be a card to keep. Because the worst case is you end up with the card you wanted for 0 mana anyway.
Yeah, well,
and all the other cases are you get all sorts of... You get a Farsight card in your hand for the whole game.
Yeah, the worst case is that you end up drawing like a 1 mana cost card or something.
Okay, but that would have been the top card anyway,
yeah.
So it would have made no difference.
I should eat you.
I'm all for. I mean, a lot of people just keep Farsight a lot of the time anyway in any matchup.
Which you have to be careful with, because then you can run into issues of you run into stuff like, well, it would have been on the top of my deck anyway, what order is my deck, and all that nonsense, which gets pretty confusing pretty quickly. But Faeli's still doing a surprisingly good job of keeping ahead on this board, and now with a Zola picked up, we could just see Zola freeze again on the Houndmaster Shore.
I wonder.
Yep, decision time, because he can also go for Keleseth if he wants to.
Oh yeah, okay.
And just go sort of crazy with the minions.
Shard.
And it's my instinct was Shard too.
Shard doesn't do that much though at the moment, because everything has rush anyway. Your board is probably taken care of. Once Shudderwock does activate, however, you would much rather have 2 freezes than 2 Keleseth buffs. I think because 1 buff with your Keleseth each time I think is good enough on the Shudderwock.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It was my instinct, but definitely worth consideration. We're seeing from the top players more and more now, they are playing slower and slower, and it is because they do pay due attention to those slightly weird plays when it is right.
We are seeing that from some players. From some players here today, like Casey and Muzzy, we've seen them literally, we haven't even seen the card drawn before they play their turn. Right, our analysis has to be, well, if the next card they draw is blah blah, then this play looks good.
Then he will play it instantly.
Yeah, exactly.
And Navi did that on 2 or 3 occasions yesterday. There was one in particular where we literally, what you said, we literally did not see the card. It just appeared on the table and the end turn was green again. Or yellow again, because we see it from the bottom perspective. But yeah.
Tyler here still able very nicely to dodge the mind control tech for the moment, which needs to put a question into Faeli's mind here of, is my opponent deliberately playing around mind control tech because they have the ability to make more than 3 minions but they're choosing not to, or are they making as many minions as possible and it's unlikely they will ever make more than 4 minions?
But even then, you still don't play it, because if you play it, they just play more than 4 anyway.
Right.
It's old, keep it because you have to, not because you think they're not going to walk into it. This is weird. I think Faeli's got a lot of planning to do here. There's lines where he can keep removing stuff forever and try and do the normal Shudderwock. Or there are still lines where he can sort of save for Volcano into Hagatha and try and get value. I think, especially with the coin in hand, this is not an easy curve or an easy plan to come up with.
I think looking at the hand, it's so unlikely that going for this consistent board clear works out because of, I mean, Faeli doesn't know this. I'm sorry, I'm basing this off of Tyler's hand because he has Katharina, he has Rexar as well. All the big power cards to get the consistent damage rolling. Because as soon as Katharina does come down on turn 8, there's still a there's still a Witchwood Grizzly and King Crush in the deck, I believe, for Tyler. Checking to see if he's got no high main in there, as a lot of the players seem to be cutting. So 2 beasts left. The damage will be piling up for Tyler pretty rapidly.
But I mean, Faeli also has the top of his deck to play with for some turns. And he's got double shard on the Shudderwock already, plus that Keleseth buff. Nothing spectacular there, but if he gets a chain gang in the next 2 or 3 turns, he can start thinking, can I tempo this out with the Shudderwock with just 1 chain gang? You know, not even necessarily worry about Grumble. He'll be able to have a turn where he freezes a load of stuff, probably mind control takes some stuff, so he wants that in the pool.
That's probably his plan.
And then just have this 1 turn where he goes really wide and hope it all works out.
And even if he hadn't found Chain Gang, which, I mean, there you are.
That was handy, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mind Control Tech on the previous turn, I think, was his play over. He drew the Manatide Totem off the top. It all worked out very nicely for Faeli, as he's still managing to clear off the board every turn more impressively than I thought he would be able to. But now is where it starts to really go south for him. Katharina just being slammed down here. You don't even think about it for Tyler. This is a very dominant turn, which Faeli needs to find an answer to. Thankfully, he doesn't have a bad response to this.
Now, the way that this has worked out, he has a great response with Electra and Volcano. Clears exactly 14 up, that's tidy, and then the thing that's produced by Katharina just gets killed, which is probably going to be 12. Has an Electra on the board, and he has double Chain Gang and Shudderwock and Hex. I think this looks really nice for him suddenly.
Oh, do you go Electra Volcano? You don't even know that there's another minion left. They could have the other Witchwood Grizzly being drawn. What else is Electra good
Actually,
for,
it doesn't kill, it does 17, yeah. Electra, you've got to hope that Katharina dies, I think, on the first one. But it should.
Right, oh, okay, yeah.
It should.
Oh, yeah, of course, Electra itself is in play.
Yeah, it should die, though. But if it goes wrong, I guess, yeah, maybe he wants to sign some damage first to be 100%. But I think I go Electric Volcano there and take the chance.
I think I actually disagree with you. I think the fact that you can load up so heavily with Chain Gangs on this turn means on the next turn, even if they have the Witchwood Grizzly still inside their Katharina, you can then just go for Electra into Volcano next turn after you've weakened up the health total a bit. Why take the risk?
Saves you a Hex. This is interesting. I'm a lot more willing to take those risks on the 6-6 and 8-8 because the 8-8 is incredibly likely to live, but I certainly don't blame him as he's got the second Chain Gang and Mind Control, and Shudderwock has got a lot to set up here. This sets up his Shudderwock better than what I was talking about.
Wow, Tyler here going for a cube on the Katharina purely because it's a 6-6 and he gets a cube in play. This is just a decent sized board that will be able to be ramped up in pressure, especially because he has the charge Vicious Fledgling here to potentially push, what is that, 8 damage in 1 turn if it gets Wind Fury? That is a big amount of charge.
Pretty silly.
Yeah. And now, Electro Volcano, good luck.
Yeah.
What's that going to be?
This is what I wasn't scared of exactly the cube on the Katharina, but I was scared of the more things you put down, the harder the electric turn becomes. Yes, it was risky, but I don't think it's as risky as maybe he thought.
Fair enough, fair enough. So it was 18, so it was only...
Yeah, either
3 damage short. I think it was actually quite unlikely to die. If there was 17 health on board, I think it would have been closer.
They are messy maths.
Yeah, it's messy.
Sottle challenged me to do them before he did them. We've been playing chicken for about a year now. Neither of us done it, but
I guess my guess is that it's less likely than you think that he dies, which is why Faeli wouldn't have gone through it. Because I think if he could have got a guaranteed clear, we would have seen it. Sure. Yeah. Farsight into Farsight into Hex, the true Hagatha memery that Faeli was looking for here.
And a little bit of BM from Faeli, which is very rare from him, yeah.
And oh my goodness, this is starting to look pretty miserable for Tyler. Now the Mossy Horror doesn't get the job done against these opposing buffed up Saronite chain gangs. Exploding Bloatbat is usually the card you're looking for above all. But Scavenging Hyena here, these frogs are beasts. If those die off, then, you know, that gives you a little bit of extra stats on board.
And the problem with the Bloatbat here is the stuff you can see isn't the problem.
Yeah.
It's the stuff you can't see. Shudderwalk that's the big problem. These are the sort of turns that Tyler is very good on. The very futuristic thinking turns, rather than dealing with the immediate problems, like how does this work? How is this going to work? And I imagine with Rexar he's pretty good. He did go for that hyena.
I like this a lot.
Yep.
And on this turn, what is he looking at? Like Vicious Fledgling just to charge in. He can take out both the guys. But I think this is a good recognition from Tyler that the game plan isn't to kill everything off as quick as possible. It's to make a big board. And if this board now gets Volcanoed to clear it off, he can then just go zombies with the Vicious Fledgling one and the Hyena one and push a lot of damage face. You have the face of a man doing volcano maths, Neil.
I've just got the face of a man who's staring into space, to be honest. The volcano maths looks good, I think.
I imagine he's going to be looking at Shudderwalk on this turn. I think it's not outside the realms of possibility because it's got Hagatha in there. It's got 2 Saronite chain gangs. I guess it's a little bit risky still because the zombies could clear it off, at which point you're just losing at that point. So why take the risk? Do it when it guarantees you a win.
So he bails on the volcano, which I think is okay, but again, he does have a chance to clear things up. But I think he may think that his board is actually better than Tyler's.
I think that's not a bad assessment.
Yeah, it's close, right?
With the MC Tech stealing any of the taunts there, this helps a lot.
So why would you volcano when you're at least level?
Yeah. And this is where the a Bloatbat for Tyler would be looking quite a lot better than this than this Hyena.
Yeah, I mean the Hyena's still going to be around for a while, but you're right, the Bloatbats, they turn down.
Oh no, the frog that dies gives it an extra +2/+1. Okay, that's pretty cute.
That's nice.
I guess this isn't bad. The Mossy Horror makes up for it and gets a big minion on board, so it works out maybe even better here than the Bloatbat would have done.
Now Faeli has just got every Overload card in Hearthstone hanging around. So much damage available here. Obviously the Volcanoes are a thing you're going to look at every time, but Earth Shocks and Forked Lightnings can rattle up that damage.
Yeah, I think if he goes for Forked Lightning, it's a definite clear. Otherwise, it's only 10, 17 health on board. Oh, but he's instead let it rip with the Shudderwalk.
He's got a lot of MC Techs, shards, and extra Shudderwalks to come here.
Unfortunate freeze there because Hagatha will be dealing with that minion anyway, but that is the perfect Zola to get to bounce another Shudderwalk back to his hand. This, I think, was a very nicely timed Shudderwalk because he realized last turn he was ahead on board, so let's make advantage of that. But now, This, even though it's just going to be one Shudderwock a turn for Faeli, that should be enough.
Yeah. I say yeah like that because that didn't go well for him. And
It didn't go that bad.
A path dimly lit.
it should be okay. The Tyler is out of stuff. He's down to Rexar and his beasts. And they're kind of slow. They're amazing, but they're kind of slow. A lot of the time he'll just be equalising and then Faeli just does his thing again.
But this is what Faeli realised, is that even though I agree with you, it went pretty poorly considering what the outcomes were, this is still a game-winning scenario.
Yeah.
It's still fantastic for him to get this far ahead, and Tyler now is in a difficult spot to pull this back. So I imagine he will have taken the Crackling Razormaw on the first pick, which makes Bloodfen Raptor definitely worth considering on this pick, because then you can go 2 4-mana Zombeasts and push a lot of damage through to face. Instead, however, he's taking the Stealth just to get the maximum amount of damage to face over the next few turns.
Yeah, and he's going to struggle to commit damage to face. There's going to be way too defensive. Obviously, he can't defend, so he's got to attack, but getting there seems reliant on this charging fledgling.
And all Faeli really needs to worry about now is hand size with this Shudderwock. He needs to not mess up and make it so no Shudderwocks go back to hand. We could just see if he wants to going for a very aggressive line of Healing Rain to heal up his own Shudderwocks, and then an Earth Shock on the bear.
Yeah. Bit difficult to empty his hand too well because of all the overload, which means he wouldn't get a Shudderwock down on the turn after.
That's the hard bit.
So a little bit awkward for him here.
But I think this is a good recognition that this is not a Shudderwock turn, this is a dump cards from your hand turn.
Yes.
Because as long as he doesn't die, as long as it would have to be such a specific Zombeast on this turn, like a Crackling Razormaw to adapt the current Crackling Razormaw for charge, and also get Stone Tusk Boar doesn't even come close to lethal.
You can give your Fledgling +3 attack, and then get Wind Fury, and then that's probably his out actually, something along those lines. And then give it another +3 attack, I don't know.
Yeah.
First we've got to not die as well.
Yeah, this play from Faeli. I wonder if Earth Shock was better on this turn instead of the Voltaic Burst, because it doesn't leave him overloaded and would have done much the same thing anyway. Either way, I still feel like he accomplished the primary goals of this turn, which is just to get rid of cards from your hand.
There's Wind Fury. If he took the Rhino, that could be exciting.
That's true. He'll be looking at Stealth again, though, because Stealth is remarkably powerful against these control decks. But when you're facing down, what even is this, like 25, maybe more damage on this turn, it is just way too much and you're going to be dying. Like, well, you push damage to face here, and he heals up. Or you just don't even come close to lethal. Tyler knows he needs something spectacular to win this game. Of which I don't think anything exists.
He's not far off lethal next turn. If Faeli forgets to trade or doesn't kill him.
Okay.
The zombie, you've got the charging fledgling plus another 4 mana thing. You put the fledgling next to the wolf that is hidden, that's another +1.
He's so likely to play, like, if he just plays Shudderwock on this turn, that does 3 damage to everything, which kills off your...
Yeah, and usually
5/3
everything. Yeah, you're in a lot of trouble, but he's finding ways to keep the game alive if Faeli has a moment.
I agree, maybe there's like a 0.01% that he can still get the zombies to save him. Or more likely what happens is, while I don't believe he will, Faeli messes up. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you've got to play for. When you've run out of real ways to win the Hearthstone game, you have to play for your opponent to mess up. Yeah. That's all you've got left. At this level, the reason they don't do it very often is because people don't mess up very often. But we have seen it in this tournament where players have messed up Shudderwock. Faeli has been in multiple top 8s this year for this reason, that he's unlikely to mess up.
And everything that could go wrong kind of went wrong there for Faeli. The minions came in the wrong order.
And that shows how hard it was to mess up, because he's still... Tyler's relying on...
So it's Bloatbat now. It's Bloatbat on this turn, and you hope that your opponent doesn't have the damage to kill you, because then you've killed off his Shudderwock. Maybe that's just his win condition then gone. That is not it. Tyler knows that was his only chance, and I think now we're going to be seeing the concede against the deck, which Tyler wanted to target above all others in this matchup. He knew his best chance of winning this series was to hard target the Shudderwock, but with it now taking a victory, it's going to be all in on defeating Faeli's even lock to get through to the top 4.
Yep, he's 2-0 against this even lock. He's going to have to do it with his Hunter, and not the Game 5 we expected at all. But Tyler will still find himself in a slightly favoured position, I feel.
Yeah, I think he's in a pretty good spot here. I like the Death Rattle versus. It's a little light on the beasts for Tyler because of no Savannah high main, but cards like Spider Bomb can be very important in this matchup because you, again, need to find the answer to those big Giants and Twilight Drakes.
This is really interesting for Tyler. He has drawn 4 of his best cards.
Really?
How many of them is he going to actually keep with synergy that work together? Well, Kathrina's fantastic, but
Yeah.
you don't really want it until 8. Egg into cube is obviously the way you probably set up the win for this. Your candle shot's great if you get the Hunter's Mark, so it was interesting to see how he approached it, and he went with the Egg synergy cards, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I really like getting rid of the candle shot in particular. I think you need to be a little bit more optimistic in this matchup. Maybe you get a Hunter's Mark, but it's far from guaranteed. Kathrina, I agree, is too slow. Cube, Faeli is running 2 Spellbreakers in his deck, which lowers the efficacy of the Carnivorous Cube a little bit at least. He would much rather find some of the more early aggro cards, but I mean, this is Hearthstone. We've seen since the dawn of Kobolds vs Catacombs just how devastatingly powerful Carnivorous Cube is.
Yeah, and this hand seems to be nice and fluid here for Tyler. Okay, the casting costs sort of indicate a curve, but actually he is going to have quite a lot of options available because he has a coin, how to react with flanking strikes, how to use the Hunter's Mark. Obviously those have legitimate, obvious targets, and they're probably going to end up being played the obvious way. But in other circumstances, if Faeli hadn't drawn pretty much everything he wants, these cards could be used in different manners.
Yeah, it's a nice starting hand for Faeli. We're not going to beat around the bush here, HCT Singapore. The Mounted Giant and Twilight Drake are just great ways to bait out the Hunter's Mark, if it's even there. Obviously, Faeli does not know what answers Tyler has knocking about. And then the threats just don't really stop here. There's those 2 powerful options. Even just a Shroomberry is fine. Silence at this point is great against Death Rattle Hunter to deal with an egg or a cube. And we very possibly see it just now coming down to deal with the egg.
This is a very tough decision here that he's gone with, because now he isn't going to be able to deal with the cube should it get on the egg, for instance, like this. Immediately giving up the advantage, but it gave him a significant tempo boost by having this on the board, and now he's got his Drake and his Giant still to come with a decent board in place. So there was a lot going on in that turn for Faeli.
There really was, followed up by a lightning fast play from Tyler to go with the cube on the egg, which is, I mean, we talk about how in this matchup cubing an egg is generally not a fantastic card to cube. It's generally fast rather than a value play. But cubing a silenced egg is miserable because you don't even get a 5/5 out of it. It's basically just in the immediate, the cube value that he's getting, which says to me from Tyler either one of 2 things. The less likely, I think, is that he just wants the cube on board immediately because he needs to win the game right away. I think what's more likely, which could actually come perfectly into fruition here, is he's realizing if I coin cube here, Mossy Horror on turn 6 should be able to destroy both of my eggs, giving me 2 5/5s. This is actually some pretty genius foresight coming through here from Tyler.
Yep, and still got a lot of work to do with it though. Double Hellfire is going to be pretty grim for him when he gets there.
And just look how fast this came out. This was clearly Tyler's thinking right from the get-go, and it's going to put himself in a pretty good spot. The answers are there from Faeli, as we can see, in the form of, well, just minions or double Hellfire, Hellfire Defile, whatever. Over the next couple of turns, the answers will be there. But this is a much better spot Tyler has got himself into than would have been available with slower lines of play.
So Faeli has a pretty cute-looking just double trade into Defile, then drop his own Twilight Drake, if he wants to do that right now.
Yeah.
And that'll put him back on a decent position. Obviously, mine is the Giant that was helping him so much. Just go nicely into the Lich King on 8. And they are going to start lobbing amazing stuff at each other in the next couple of turns. Big things are out there.
Oh yeah, this is where the decks really start ramping up. After The Giant couldn't be played on turn 4 due to the Spellbreaker having to come down from Faeli, and then the Hunter's Mark being there as well. Things have gone pretty much card for card here. Now it's just about who can do the most disgustingly powerful turns as quickly as possible. And as it currently stands, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. They've both had turns that in other matchups would be just game-winning.
Yeah.
Even Faeli's Silence of the Egg gave him... This tempo has lasted this far. It was all goes back to there, which is why he still has attacker's advantage to this day. And then Tyler's massive comeback with making a big board, but Faeli still had that attacker's advantage, which meant he could control the Defile.
Yeah.
And it all went back to the fact he chose to silence an egg, not a cube, and even though Tyler had the perfect answer to it, it still didn't make Faeli's decision wrong.
Tyler here, I think if he'd had all the beasts left in his deck, we very possibly would have seen a Playdead there, because then Katharina Playdead is devastatingly powerful. But with, I believe, only Witchwood Grizzly left in the deck for Tyler, the Playdead just has nothing he actually wants to target at all. So the Spider Bomb, even if it's just thrown out preemptively to deal with a Lich King or Hooked Reaver, is a very, very respectable way of pulling the board back in his way with a big tempo swing.
Yeah, he will be, of course, hoping to get something to go with it, but Faeli, with the even lock, very difficult to get many minions down, so that Spider Bomb should still do what Tyler wants it to when he gets the chance. And the game just goes insane from about this point onwards. We've got Katharinas, Rexars, everything. Every card in both hands is just insane right now. Slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you get on me for being over-exaggerating, but... The Defile here not quite perfect for Faeli, because there's 1 and 3 health minions
Hellfire
effectively.
Hooked Reaver looks pretty good.
Yeah. I think he was trying to think on this turn. Wow, actually,
He prefers the Defile. Maybe trying to save double Hellfire for later. That's the thing he can do.
Okay.
Because the size of the minions that are coming up sooner rather than later.
And he does actually really want to develop a taunt on this turn, which is resilient to King Crush. And while it may sound silly to say that the Vulgar Homunculus is better than the Hooked Reaver, it's just a small rubbish minion against King Crush. If that has to attack in because it comes off Katharina into the 2/4, that's a fantastic result for Faeli. Whereas if Faeli was to develop the Hooked Reaver, Katharina is played and King Crush smashes in to deal with the Hooked Reaver, that's a pretty big consideration because you're losing one of your best minions in the hand.
Both going to have card draw each turn as well, due to their various hero powers.
Well, that's if Deathstalker Rexar is played, which is far from a certainty at this point. Tyler...
Yeah, Tyler's under too much pressure to have time to bother messing around with beasts.
Well, not even just that. He's looking to go towards lethal, I think, pretty soon. With King Crush in hand, it's always a consideration.
I mean, they are playing a game of health total chicken right now, but
yeah.
I do feel like Faeli is winning that. Oh, this could change things, though. Doesn't necessarily immediately, but the chance to double Spider Bomb on the next 2 turns.
Well, we can see Spider Bomb magnetized with Ziliax first, which means there would be a 5 attacker. It just doesn't quite work out. You can't take out the Hooked Reaver with Katharina, so you're taking at best in that situation a 1 in 3 to take out the Hooked Reaver.
The 5 health gains usually wants to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean that's the big part of this, I think.
And he doesn't know about the double Hellfire, but when you get these far through the decks, you start to legitimately factor that sort of thing in.
Yeah.
It's so close, Derek. It's game 5 in the quarterfinals, and we have no idea who's going to win.
He was considering that for a long while, but in the end, I think he came to the same conclusion we did, of just the 1 in 3 is not good enough. If he failed, the game's lost. And if he thought that was his only chance, he would have snap taken it. But he thinks, I'm not in that bad of a position. Clearly Tyler here thinking, I can still edge out this game with Zombeasts and King Crush.
Yeah, and the defenses in theory could be low for Faeli. We can see there is a Lich King waiting to appear and cast his frosty grip across the game.
Yeah.
Or whatever excitement I'm supposed to say there. But considering that Tyler's the deck that's supposed to be throwing the haymakers at this point, it's still Faeli who's actually seems to have most of the threats. That will change very, very soon now that Rexar's found its way onto the board, though.
Faeli is really starting to run out of juice now. A Hooked Reaver that can't even activate yet. The Lich King is by far the best he has, which is no slouch. Obviously, this is a big turn for him. But if Tyler can surmount this one final hurdle to deal with this board and push for a lethal, he could be very much back in this game. And with that many Death Rattle activators, Spider Bomb is looking insane here.
Yeah. And just in time, because that anti-magic shell from the Lich King would have been just the end of the game in so many ways. But this Spider Bomb's got great options now.
He can just take a 50-50 with Magnetize onto Ziliax, trade into the Hooked Reaver, and then play dead for a potential basically just winning the game, I think, if he gets the Lich King there with the Death Rattle.
So he needs to now work out how often he loses the game if it misses, and also what he thinks his chances are anyway.
It's not that... it's obviously really bad if he misses, so maybe he just doesn't bother and instead goes for a hero power because he still gains 5 health with the immediate rush in. It still has the Death Rattle that Faeli would have to consider on his next turn. But the upside of if it does hit the Lich King is so good.
Yep, if he feels that he's going to lose this match, that is the play. If he feels it is still in the balance, maybe he'll postpone it. But he's feeling that he's behind enough, and he's feeling it right when we look at Faeli's hand.
Oh, here we go!
Good luck, everybody. Tyler looks at the crowd, he shuts his eyes.
Oh! And that's a big miss.
So, how close to lethal is this? The answer is very close, but not quite.
Yeah, not quite there. Even with Spellstone, it doesn't quite take out the Ziliax. And that would obviously get the Death Rattle anyway. So Faeli needs to find some way of, again, trying to divert the Death Rattle away from the Lich King.
Many possibilities.
There's
seen this play
here
happen
from
a lot of
Faeli.
time, yeah.
This brings me back to the good old Rag days almost. Ragnaros Firelord going for the chance to snipe off the right minion.
So he's got an 8 mana play in mind, so he can get to tap. An extra minion is gold dust in some situations here, but then he won't have the mana to actually take down the Spider Bomb.
And this is the benefit for Tyler. I think he came to the decision at the end is even if I miss and hit the Ooze instead of the Lich King, it's awkward for my opponent. And again, it's going to be the chance to get rid of the Lich King.
Tarek has lost it on that one.
Oh,
but
poor
the
Tyler.
Lich King not so big. Well, it is a big threat 'cause he's developing amazing cards every turn. But felt like it's not as big a threat when he is into a 3 health minion.
He starts to turn around pretty quickly now for Tyler. Does he rush King Crush into the Lich King or Skulking Geist? Like, none of those feel good, because if you put it into the Skulking Geist, you very possibly get hit with a Spellstone, or as we can see, the Obliterate there off of the Lich King.
None of the cards in hand are good enough. I think he's going to have to make his own.
Yeah. Cave Hydra there, I imagine, was the first picked option just to deal with this wide board, and the second one, Stealth, that's fine. It's not as good as the immediate option of Rush with a Scale Hide potentially, but this is good enough.
Magic
Clear
Shell
off the board.
is going to be nutso though.
How much damage is that? That's 12, add another 4, 16, 19 damage?
Yeah, which puts double Hellfire in range of lethal.
That's true.
Obviously there is that Zombies in hand, the Life Drinker one, but that's just not a good Zombies.
It's not great. That would be, however, pretty much a full board clear, though, so Faeli needs to be careful about... Oh, no, sorry, almost a full board clear.
Yeah, the Hydra's going to do wonderful things.
It's going to do pretty good work with its kind of cleave effect, I suppose it would be called, of targeting both minions on either side of the minion it attacks.
But again, one of the things that happens when you're playing Vexar is your opponent almost always sees what's coming, because they know either you've got a rush minion to create, and they know the chance of that, or they know this is a situation.
And this is the downside of Stealth. It is different from Rush in the fact that Faeli has the perfect opportunity to play around it. Non-taunted minion in the middle, all buffed up to the point where this single Cave Hydra will not be able to clear off this board. A miracle needs to happen for Tyler right now.
Yeah. Again, that is the downside, the small downside of Vexar. The minions tend to be a bit clunky, other than the ones that cheat with Rush. But that pool is Even though it's quite easy to get, the pool is quite well known.
Can he make anything happen with Cube and Stalker on this turn? Again, if it had a rush or charge, that would be amazing. But doesn't get the job done here. He's just going to have to dig with Wildebeest once again.
No Murlocs.
Yeah, none of those are looking like they're getting the job done. No Bloat Bat yet again. No Hydra to get the rush in. Stone Tusk Boar, there's Taunt. Maybe this can get the damage up to the point where the Hydra takes out the minions. He can now get Lich King off of the board and the 6/6.
Not enough.
He has to go for it though.
Yeah, he doesn't know it's not enough, but it's not enough. And Faeli is going to make another semi-final appearance. His best result so far this year was second in the original Oslo event. And once again showing just how much of a breakout year this is for him. I've said it multiple times this year. If it wasn't for sort of the top 3 players, and there's always a top 3 players, so it's not quite how it works, but if it wasn't for the really big names of Hunter Ace and Muzzy and Saiyan going insane, Faeli would be one of the big success stories of the year, and it's yet another fantastic finish for him, whatever happens now.
Could not be more happy for Faeli. A very well played game of Hearthstone there, I think, for him. And for Ty